1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff at 2:13. 7.6 million pounds of thrust, and it has cleared the tower.
Prepare yourself for a world of science.
Good morning, everybody. Conley here with the Science Nights in the morning. And get this, all the nights are assembled today. Very excited for this episode because it really does, honestly, kind of tickle a fancy in me, if you will, from my youth and my childhood. Back in the day, I had a giant toy chest. And in that toy chest, I had all the dinosaurs. All of them. All the dinosaurs.
Be honest, Conley. You still have that chest, don't you?
I still have the chest, okay. Yeah, and I still have all the dinosaurs.
You mean the chickens, right?
No, well, no.
Those are dinosaurs.
but there's something interesting. So first off, before we get into it, Dr. Sean Graham on the call, Dr. Thomas Shiller
everybody.
Here. Oh yeah, and then Dr. Anirban Bhattacharjee.
What's
whole
up,
crew.
everybody?
Now, did y'all have toys, Sean? Did you have dinosaur toys growing up?
Absolutely. Yep. I had the standard kind of plastic bag with the multicolored dinosaurs, which, would always include a Dimetrodon and a woolly mammoth, which didn't belong there.
Exactly.
But, yeah, I loved them.
How about you, Tom? Did you have the dinosaur toys?
I had part of a Slinky.
Part of a Slinky.
But I straightened it.
And then it was a dinosaur. It could be whatever you want.
I'm making a Ghostbusters reference there.
Oh, that okay.
My son is obsessed with Ghostbusters right now, and it's pretty awesome.
Oh, good for him.
We've watched the
great.
movie maybe 100 times over the past couple of weeks.
Oh my gosh, the original?
Yeah.
Wow.
Both of them, yeah. One
wow.
And two. But I had the bucket o' dinosaurs.
Yep. But did you ever get into the specialty stuff? Like every time I saw a toy, like at a store or anything of a dinosaur, I would throw a fit until my parents bought it for me. They always bought it for me.
I had a bucket of dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't do much toy shopping when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Anirban? Did you have dinosaur toys?
No, I didn't have dinosaur toys.
Did you just have tigers?
No, nothing like that.
You didn't have toys?
Oh, I had toys, but not dinosaur toys.
What kind of toys did you have?
I had robots.
You had robots in India?
Yes. I had
Voltron?
I don't know. I had just robots and trains.
Did you have the Legos? Do they have Legos in
India?
India?
Yeah. I had Legos.
You had Legos? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I wasn't much of a Lego kid or Hot Wheels kid.
Oh, no. These are not Legos robots. These are actual robots.
Oh, okay.
He built robots, Conley.
Yeah, I
like
built
real robots with AI?
Yeah. Kind of something like that. Like Optimus Prime.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Transformers.
Yeah. Not one dinosaur.
Yeah.
All I had were dinosaurs, and I even went as far as getting the updated ones because in our day there was a time where Jurassic Park came out and it changed the look of the dinosaur completely. Didn't even outdated.
Yep.
All my other dinosaur toys. Now all my new dinosaurs had to look like what was on Jurassic Park because that's how they really looked. Well, we're finding on this episode that actually it keeps changing. And what we thought once were dinosaurs really didn't look anything like they were now. But I still think the 90s dinosaurs look the coolest. But fortunately, we have a whole episode to talk about this. I'm geeking out right now just looking through this list. And we're going to go through retro versus modern dinosaurs today. And we're going to be talking about some older dinosaurs that looked in a certain way and then how they kind of evolved now. And now they have feathers, so.
Yep.
So let's start a little bit, Thomas. Kick it off, man.
Well, I have to admit something first. This whole idea for an episode originated by Conley sending us this link on Facebook Messenger. And I was really excited to click on this link and read the article that Conley sent, but I'm no longer a part of the metaverse. So I tried clicking on the link and I couldn't actually see anything. So all I saw was just the very bottom of that picture on the link.
There
I'm going to assume what that article was about.
Okay.
So that we can jump off of that for the rest of this episode.
Sure.
But I saw T-Rex.
Oh, yeah.
Can I assume that T-Rex was a key feature in the article about the evolution of how dinosaurs are depicted?
Well, the article really kind of explained a little bit about what we our own learning as scientists, right? And what we kind of speculate for these animals to look like. Though we've never seen them before, we can speculate through the bones we find and all the little pieces of evidence we pick up along the way. So what's cool is that we're kind of indoctrinating people in pop culture, especially like through toys and manufacturing and whatnot, to believe everything that these scientists are concluding, which is funny because it always changes. And
that's why I don't think concluding or conclusion is a good term, because science is always changing, and the evolution, quote unquote, of dinosaur depictions is a great example of that, because it's something that we've seen happen recently, but it happened really quick.
Right.
You know, people have been finding dinosaur fossils for a long time, probably longer than we have written record of. You know, some of the earliest myths, dragons and griffins, are probably generated because people were finding these weird
giant skulls,
reptilian
and
things,
femurs and everything.
Yeah. So, but the revolutions, as we call them in dinosaur discovery and how we depict dinosaurs, that's happened over the past couple hundred years, and it's happened in phases. The one you mentioned is not really the most recent. It's kind of the second, revolution in dinosaur understanding, and that's the one that happened in the 80s and the 90s. And movies like Jurassic Park, they kind of show that evolution in science. So the way T-Rex, for example, looks in Jurassic Park is way different than what it looked like in Valley of Guanji or King Kong,
right,
or Lost World, in the early 1900s. And that all has to do with new discoveries, like you said. A lot of the early depictions we had of dinosaurs were based on just a few things. And if you can imagine, look at something like T-Rex. Everyone knows what a T-Rex skeleton looks like. And if you take that and you get rid of 80% of the bones, maybe even you don't even have an entire skull of the thing.
Right.
And try to imagine not having any other data, any other observations. How are you going to fill in the missing pieces, right? The earliest people who were trying to describe dinosaurs, understandably so, saw a lot of characteristics, a lot of traits that were similar to reptiles, things that we can observe, lizards, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the earliest depictions, they look a lot like lizards, really big lizards.
Giant lizards. Hey, this is the beginning of the evolution. When is the beginning of the evolution of depictions of dinosaurs? When were the first dinosaurs discovered, and where was the first depiction of a dinosaur?
So I'd say the earliest sort of dinosaur renaissance is in the mid to late 1800s.
Right.
Wow, that's not that far.
Something like that.
Yeah. Preceding what we call the Bone Wars.
Right.
And this is when the scientific community, especially in more advanced nations in Europe and in North America, people actually had the means, the wealth, and the desire to pursue paleontology. So the earliest sort of revolutionary figures in paleontology emerged during that time. And coinciding with that, they start trying to figure out what these animals look like. So if we look at the mid-1800s, late 1800s, we have a bunch of really beautiful dinosaur paleo artwork, because they didn't even have great cameras to take photos of these things.
Yeah.
So if you look at papers that were published around the late 1800s, even going into the early 1900s, these scientists were also incredible artists, giving these really technical, precise illustrations of dinosaur bones, and ultimately recreations of what the animals may have looked like. So some of these I'll give a specific example. In the 1800s, I think it was 1853, in London, they opened this huge exhibition in what was called the Crystal Palace. just a enormous universal scientific exhibition. And this was probably the first mainstream sort of depiction of what we now call dinosaurs. They basically constructed this dinosaur park at the Crystal Palace with everything they knew of at the time, including a dinosaur that we know a lot more about today called Iguanodon.
That's where I was going to lead.
Yeah.
I remember that picture too.
And that's probably the exemplar of what we're talking about here, because the earliest depiction of Iguanodon, again, this is mid-1800s, was put together with really limited material.
Yeah.
They had some limb bones and some other bones. They had some teeth, which were very similar to modern iguana teeth, hence the name Iguanodon, iguana teeth. But if you look at the earliest depictions of this, including a big statue that they made for the Crystal Palace exhibition, it just looks like a big fat iguana. And it's got a big horn on the tip of its snout.
Yeah, right on its nose. It kind of reminds you of, like, if it were living today, it'd be like a cross between a reptile, like a lizard, like an iguana, but like the body of a hippo, right? And then at the very tip of its nose, it had this huge long spike.
Yep.
And it had these little frills that are going like vertically down its spine, and it's the top of its head.
It looks a little bit like a scaled up rhinoceros iguana. There is such thing as a rhinoceros iguana that has a big horn on its snout. It's from the Caribbean. It's big, and it has those little leaf-shaped teeth. So this is like, when you look at that statue, my tendency as a kid was like, oh my God, these guys were morons. That thing looks stupid.
Yeah.
But given what they knew, it's actually pretty incredible, because those teeth, the iguanodon teeth, are almost exactly the same shape as a modern iguana's tooth for slicing vegetation. Right? And they found this big, sharp conical object. They didn't know it was going to be the thumb of the thing. What we know now, I assume, we're still pretty sure that the iguanodon had a big, crazy, horny thumb. Yep. And that's where that structure ended up. But for them, they're like, what do they got to go on? They don't know the entire diversity of dinosaurs, and they've never seen Jurassic Park. So what are they going to do? Well, it's a giant rhinoceros iguana. It's 100% intuitive. They did a great job. The statue looks like shit, but it's pretty good.
That story is even more nuanced, though, and the original sort of idea of what Iguanodon looked like was an actual, like, slim, very reptilian iguana with a big long whip tail. The first guy, the guy who named Iguanodon, I can't remember his name for some reason, Mantell. He suggested it was just like a giant iguana. And like Sean was describing, if you look at a picture of this thing, the Iguanodon statue at the Crystal Palace, it's kind of chunky. It looks like a rhino with an iguana head with all these spikes.
Right.
The funny story behind that was Mantell died before they finished that sculpture. And one of his contemporaries, who was a creationist, who thought that Iguanodon was basically a morphed reptile mammal hybrid thing. Basically instructed the people that were constructing it to make it like half mammal, half reptile, to conform with his ideas. So there's even more backstory behind that.
I don't understand the creationism person thinking how a half mammal, half reptile is somehow fitting into the idea of creationism.
It was some weird idea that they had.
It's the idea that nothing back then, extinction was not accepted. There's basically anything that was around had to fall in line with an existing form. Yeah. And so extinction was not a thing. They had not proven extinction. So this thing that has no precedent on Earth, the way you get there is by having a strange, the history of that stuff is crazy, and it is actually consistent with some of the ideas of early creationism.
Wow!
But shortly thereafter, future scientists kind of put the kibosh on that. And just a few years after they constructed that for the Crystal Palace, they found better preserved iguanodon fossils.
Right.
Nearly complete skeletons. And one thing that Sean mentioned is they ultimately discovered that what they thought was a spike, a horn at the tip of the nose of the animal, was actually these weird thumb spikes that the animal had.
Yeah.
Which even in modern paleontology is still freaking weird. We don't really see anything else like that.
It's to get at, with me playing with the dinosaur toys, that was my favorite toy, was the iguanodon, because it had a way to poke the other dinosaurs in the eyeball.
Yeah, that's
When
probably
fight.
defensive.
Yeah.
At least in part defensive.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty interesting.
So-
That's always been like one of the top dinosaurs for
Wouldn't
me.
you also not be for like burrowing purposes? Is it a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian?
Yeah, it's herbivorous.
So couldn't like diet be like roots and stuff like that? I mean,
It wouldn't be that practical for that sort of thing. It's people are pretty certain that it was some
For defensive?
maybe mating. Not all that pleasant though for the female iguanodon.
Yeah, some sort of clasper, a clasper for
Yeah.
the males to gain purchase.
Yeah, but then the
There are lots-
females
there are
have
structures like
the
that.
spikes too. So
Okay,
It's-
if there's no
it's-
sexual dimorphism, that's
no.
it's a mystery.
They have very clean spikes, by the way, though. Very clean. Anyway, so-
Yeah, let's not get.
all right. Okay, explain something to me, because back then too, the tail dragged on the ground for all of these. Now, what led to the conclusion? We have about 5 minutes left until the next, segment. What is the deal with the tails?
So, if you try to put yourself in the shoes of these early scientists, these early paleontologists, to justify or to try and figure out what these big bipedal, these are animals that are walking on two legs, how they would have stood upright, you're only left with any sort of, with modern analogs. And we don't really have a lot of modern reptiles that at least 100% of the time stand on two hind legs. Mm-hmm. We don't have a lot of animals in general that do that. Kangaroos stand on two legs and they kind of sit on their tail. So they're working with the best data they had. But what we can talk about after the break is modern techniques in biomechanics, understanding how and why things can move, how they support their weight, really kind of dispelled this idea that these two-legged, these bipedal dinosaurs were sitting upright on their tails. It all has to do with weight distribution and balance.
Yeah, so some kind of that's part of the evolution, right? But we have what's the record that we have from these dinosaurs, and how do we really keep track as to their own evolution? Have we seen a dinosaur evolve from quadrupod or tetrapod, whatever, to just being bipedal, but with still staying within the same type species?
That's a good question. If we look at the earliest stages of not only dinosaur evolution, but the bigger group that they belong to, the archosaurs, and even bigger group, the archosauromorphs, this isn't the first time we've seen bipedalism amongst reptiles. Okay. It emerged pretty early on. Cool. So it's not unique to the dinosaurs. The way they achieved it is unique, and it's probably one of the reasons they were such dominant land animals.
Yeah.
But we do see earlier bipedal reptiles.
Cool.
And the earliest dinosaurs we have are bipedal, or at least most of the time were bipedal. Yeah. So there's really not a transition there. But when you understand how the evolution works, it's not necessary, right?
All right. Well, we're gonna.
So what I'm getting from all these bipedal dinosaurs and everything. So David Icke was right? Like, so reptilian humanoids. They are controlling us.
That's right, reptilian humanoids.
That's what is happening.
It's been a great show, guys.
Yes,
yeah.
Reptilian humanoids.
Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back, and we're going to expand a little bit more on the evolution of dinos and how we depict them.
And reptilian humanoids.
All right, we're back. You're listening to the Science Nights in the morning, and we're talking dinos. Specifically, we're talking about the evolution of depictions of dinosaurs. Now, we've been kind of talking about the history of dinosaur discoveries and how that's led to ultimately a better understanding of how dinosaurs looked and moved. And we kind of ended up by discussing a little bit of biomechanics, how we know dinosaurs didn't sit on their tails and all that. There are probably still buckets of plastic dinosaurs out there that have T-Rex sitting on its tail. And this is something we've known about for 100 years now. So I'd like to kind of jump back a little bit and continue on with the history behind all this. We talked about kind of the mid-19th century discoveries. But let's move into the later part of the 1800s and talk about a really important renaissance in paleontology, at least in North America, we call the Bone Wars. The Bone Wars basically started as a rivalry between two wealthy scientists at the time, one working in Philadelphia and one at Yale, Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Marsh. Now, these two guys, like I said, were incredibly wealthy North American scientists, and they started out as colleagues. They spent basically a summer together studying dinosaurs in Europe. Now, one event took place that many people think kind of set off the Bone Wars, and it's really a funny story, and I may have told this story before on the show, but Cope and Marsh were... Cope was working on not a dinosaur but a marine reptile, an Elasmosaurus, one of these plesiosaurs with a big long neck,
right?
Loch Ness Monster type thing. Mm-hmm. And he had been working diligently reconstructing the skeleton of one of these things, and this is the first one that anyone had ever reconstructed. And he invited Marsh to come take a look at it, look at his impressive creation. And Marsh takes a few minutes and steps back and he says, "You have the skull on the wrong end."
Oh, no.
And there are pictures of this. Marsh illustrated this in great detail, which is kind of funny. But Cope put the skull of this Elasmosaurus on the tail, and it had this big long tail extending out of the back of the body. And so Marsh just basically said that should go there, because he looked at the last vertebra in what Marsh thought was what Cope thought was the tail.
Yeah,
and it was the last neck vertebra.
Interesting.
So
now this dinosaur, what is the size? Because I've seen different sizes of heads.
Yeah,
some of them have heads that are like obviously disproportionate to the back of the neck.
This had a tiny head.
A smaller head.
Yeah, this
right?
is
okay.
Loch Ness Monster, basically.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and it's a marine reptile, not a dinosaur. But
okay.
What this basically started was a competition between the two, and not a collegial competition either. For I think maybe 7 or 8 years, maybe longer, these two guys sought to collect more fossils than the other. Okay, so they went to the most fossil-rich regions of the U.S., spent summer after summer searching for and collecting fossils and publishing them.
Yeah,
and the result of this 7-year Bone Wars was the discovery of, I think, 136 new species of dinosaurs.
Jeez.
Which is an incredible number if you think about the work that goes into collecting them, or discovering them, collecting them, preparing them, and then writing them up. So these guys were probably two of the most prolific paleontologists in history. They were both total assholes, by the way.
Yeah.
Cope was a major hothead. Marsh was this vindictive kind of weirdo.
They both sent each other published nasty letters about each other in public journals. And it should be said that they never went to Montana or Wyoming, right? They might have gone out there, but they paid people to go dig up dinosaurs,
especially marsh. Yeah.
And they had guys out there sabotaging each other's camps and shooting at each other. Like literally, it was full on one of the greatest and most heinous scientific rivalries ever. Incredible.
That seems
also
awesome.
Let me mention that the stuff that they collected is still being sorted out now. One of the greatest snake fossils wasn't even recognized as a snake fossil until like 5 years ago. It was collected by them from the Morrison Formation way back in the 1880s or 90s, whatever. And somebody just recently got around to dusting off the specimens and describing it as one of the best early snake fossils in the world. And they collected it and just ignored it because they were after the big dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So the stuff that they collected is still being sorted to this day.
Yeah, I find it funny that they were like sabotaging each other and shooting at each other. It reminds me of the Hatfields and the McCoys, but instead, it's like for paleontologists.
And it was the Old West too. It's just perfect because it was like it was the Old West.
Yeah, Colorado, Wyoming.
There really needs to be a movie about these guys. It'd be incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, but ultimately, even though it was this terrible, violent rivalry, it yielded some of the most important dinosaur fossils that people know of, right?
Wow.
And if we jump forward just a few years after that, the early 20th century, early 1900s, this is when we start to see the really popular depictions of dinosaurs. This is probably the earliest bucket of plastic dinosaurs probably originated in the early 1900s. It's probably full of asbestos.
That's true. We got to find out that's probably true. And I'll bet around that time, rubber would have been big. The first bucket of rubber dinosaurs. It's got to be true.
I'm just thinking in my mind, like this one guy's team collects like this huge amount of dinosaur kind of thing, right? Like in there, like transporting it back in like a train or something, and another guy's team like planning a heist to rob it off.
It was almost just like that.
And just like, yeah.
I don't know that they stole each other's.
I'm gonna say if you're making a movie, right? Why not? Like, it's like
you wouldn't even need to sensationalize it because, like Sean was saying, they sabotaged each other's camps. They would blow things up, and they'd hire all these teamsters and arm them with rifles. And it was Marsh tried to persuade the natives to. It was full on Old West. Yeah,
nice.
It would be
so
great.
check this out. There's the modern thing. So there's a scientific journal called Copia that's named after Edward Cope because he was kind of a herpetologist. He published a lot of descriptions of modern amphibians and reptiles, and so for over 100 years, Cope had this journal named after him. He was recently canceled, and so the journal. The journal is no longer called Copia.
I'm surprised
some of the stuff he used to write.
I'm just surprised he wasn't even canceled like 50, 60 years ago because these two guys doesn't seem like very ethical. And on a more serious note,
they both had their students in their camps, so this kind of rivalry continued on. That would have been one of the reasons why the journal was named Copia, right? Because his supporters revered him. And Marsh's supporters revered him, so that this has continued on. But Cope is now completely canceled. You can look into why that is, but there's no longer a journal named after him.
No, and I'm bringing it back, and I assume they didn't really dig in a very nice manner, right? Was it very like if you were digging?
It wasn't nice. It was public, and it was like people talked about it at the time. It was, and so this. I always loved this story because this kind of shows that on nature shows, Nova and Discovery and all these shows, they always show scientists as like great people who get along, who are collaborative and are super nice and almost like monks in lab coats. But the truth is more. I think the truth is more like the Bone Wars. I think there's a lot of where there's rivalries. A lot of people hate each other in science. They have enemies, and it's like that. And so this is a good thing for the public to know about. That it's not the Nova documentary series depiction of scientists, I think, is more fake than people probably ever give it credit for.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure Nova wasn't covering Cope and Martian, where he wouldn't cover them. They would try to
They
cover.
wouldn't touch it. Yeah,
They would cover some like
romance of
yeah,
science.
Yeah.
They
Well,
would,
if Cope's been canceled, then that's probably totally out of the question now.
yeah.
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 We don't
Well,
talk about Cope.
yeah,
No.
yeah.
We just cope.
We just cope.
I knew that
Cope.
joke was coming. Yeah, but anyway, 136 new species of dinosaurs, major renaissance in our understanding of what they look like. Because when you have the skeletons, then you can extrapolate that, you can flesh them out, and you have a better idea of what these things look like when they were alive. Now, leading into the early part of the 20th century, we're still kind of running on the idea that these are cold-blooded reptiles. To the best of our understanding, that's what they are.
Yeah.
So as such, the depictions of these dinosaurs have the bones, they have the framework, but the flesh is very much lizard-like. So you look at the earliest movies depicting dinosaurs or the artwork depicting dinosaurs in the 1900s, they're big, lumbering, cold-blooded lizards. They just have a different shape than the first depiction of Iguanodon.
And they move like almost in a stop motion way.
Because
they're made of stop motion animation.
yeah.
Oh, I thought that was actual footage.
Because they're
Okay.
they're all animated by Harryhausen or whatever. So,
Yeah.
they're all going to move that way.
So they're all-
Hey, but what? And all of them have the leathery skin.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, real
Instead of
leathery.
scales.
Like
So where
they
did the-
came from Terlingua or something.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Where did they get the leathery skin instead of? Why aren't they covered with scales? Because that would have been the immediate conclusion you'd jump to.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that I mean we have a good record of scale impressions now, but yeah, I don't know. Did you read anything about that, Sean?
I would have thought it was. Isn't there there's a kind of a famous fossil impression of the skin of like a hadrosaur, and that's pretty much like they had that one skin impression to go on. And they're like, well, I guess they were all covered with leathery stuff like this one fossil we have.
Huh.
That's what I assume it was.
Yeah.
70s, right?
Oh, I was more curious about the reptile thing, and it was very interesting when you were talking about it. It seems like it also, like the popular fiction, because you had Godzilla coming out, and you had Godzilla's the monster he fights against.
Mothra.
And they also had like leathery skins, if you remember, right? So it's weird, like how the popular fiction got so much influence from them.
Yeah, that's something I've never even thought about, the leathery skin thing. Yeah, if you watch like The Lost World and Valley of Guanji and
King
Kong.
Yeah, first King Kong, Tyrannosaur has leathery skin. It's got to be. I think that's it. It's like, was it Trachodon? Is that the skin impression that they've got?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So I'm pretty sure that's it. So like, the movie guys go to a museum and they've got the, leathery Tyrannosaur on display in like 1920 or something. They're like, oh, that's what they look like, and then they go get Harryhausen to do stop motion animation on it.
Yeah, and some of the most iconic dinosaur movies out there.
Yeah.
Like the fight scene between King Kong and T-Rex from the very first King Kong is freaking awesome. Valley of Guanji, that was like in the 60s. But even in the 60s, they were still depicted like that. And as Sean mentioned, going into the 70s and 80s, when scientists really, whenever it comes to scientific discoveries, a pattern that you find is as the sort of fundamentals are hashed out. Like we talked about the earliest discoveries and just trying to determine whether or not these things were reptilian or a different group of animals or whatever, leading up to modern paleontology, where we know quite a bit about the anatomy of the animals. Now we delve into like paleobiology and physiology and biomechanics. So leading into the 70s and especially the 80s, we had a much better understanding of the actual anatomy and physiology of these animals. And when we get into the 80s, and by this time we'd already settled that like T-Rex didn't drag its tail.
Yeah.
That was all dispelled by biomechanical analyses, and we don't have any tail drag marks in the fossil record. So, so we get into the 80s, and we've got a few really famous, well-known paleontologists that emerge.
Jack Horner.
Well, Jack Horner, he studied other stuff, but Bob Bacher, probably just as famous, if not more iconic. He published what's called the Dinosaur Heresies, which is one of the top 5 dinosaur paleontology.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, a really great book, and way ahead of its time. And he discussed what was really kind of a novel and controversial idea at the time. Dinosaurs were not cold-blooded, but they were warm-blooded. And
Boom.
yeah, what's incredible about this is we didn't have all of the well-preserved, nice feathered dinosaurs like we're finding in China. But
our technology is advancing too.
It is, but paleontology still is based a lot on just our discoveries.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So
in
Horner,
the 1970s, the technology wasn't. I mean, what are you going to do with a fossil bone that you couldn't do 50 years ago? I mean, it wasn't that great.
Yeah.
It's still kind of a comparative anatomy thing that they're doing. Ultimately, they can thin slice bone a little bit better, but they're not going to make dinosaur robots and see how they run. Yeah. Which I suppose you could do now.
Yeah, they do computer models.
It's still kind of primitive, and it's still kind of, boots on the ground paleontology, really what they're doing. But doing it with a little bit more, Bacher is like famously very brash and confident, and he's drawn pictures of dinosaurs running all over each other, and this great, really well-written book that anybody can read, and it's just awesome.
Yeah,
he cracks it wide open with that book.
Well, one of the cool things about it is he brings in biology.
Yeah,
like I said, we didn't have a record of feathered dinosaurs. When something has plumage, like insulatory plumage, that tells us right away that it's endothermic. There's no reason for an ectotherm to have insulation like that, but we didn't have that knowledge. So he did a lot of comparison with modern animals, and he looked at kind of the thresholds when it comes to like an animal's size and whether or not an endotherm or an ectotherm could support just the size of an animal like a titanosaur, like a big long-necked dinosaur. And he came to the conclusion that they were more likely warm-blooded than cold-blooded. And we know now they most likely were, because we know that birds are dinosaurs.
Right.
And they're warm-blooded. So a huge jump.
Yeah.
And that second renaissance coincided with some really great what we call paleo artists. Greg Paul is probably the most famous, and Bacher himself, both really great artists. And what they did is rather than coming up with depictions of dinosaurs for entertainment value, like most people were doing back in the early 1900s for movies and cartoons and things, they were looking at it from a biological perspective, trying to flesh out the dinosaurs based on their skeletal anatomy. So looking at bone or muscle attachment surfaces and the size of bones, and comparing that to modern animals, and how everything would have been configured.
Wow. And
so the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, really all the dinosaurs in the first Jurassic Park movie are based on these paleo artist depictions.
Wow.
Who are also scientists.
Who look awesome.
Yeah, and they make them look cool.
Yeah, really cool.
They've got tight, scaly skin. You can see all the openings in the bones. They're muscular, and they look like terrible lizards.
All right.
So that's Jurassic Park, what we grew up with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And, we're about to hit our last segment here, but when we come back, we're going to take a little trip.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, we're taking a trip here. And if you don't know this one, we'll see you after the break.
What is this?
Oh, baby, man. Now we're getting into one of my favorite parts of this whole conversation. When we discover dinosaurs with neon, neon shirts and skateboards, and then they have the sunglasses, and the sunglasses are all fossilized. And we push the dust away.
Yeah. Tell these people, explain what this
a full
what this
electric
goofiness is.
guitar.
Yeah. So this is from if y'all remember Fred Savage from the Wonder Years, who I think just got canceled.
Yeah.
This was one of these weird shows or movies that Fred Savage did about dinosaurs. Just look it up on YouTube. It's terrible.
Look it up. It's called Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Mesozoic mind, baby.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was it. Okay, so, but anyway, look it up. It is nostalgic.
Just play it after the show in full.
Okay, yeah, sure. Why not? Well, then we'll get canceled.
Yeah.
No, but, okay, so moving on into really kind of right before we know what we know about the feathers, because the last time I heard, dinosaurs with feathers was like, what?
Yep.
Completely changing the game on us. So go ahead and continue on here.
Didn't people used to think Archaeopteryx was also a dinosaur?
Well, Archaeopteryx is a dinosaur. Yeah.
So why was people's mind blown off with the feathers thing?
So Archaeopteryx is a good place to start. Speaking of incredible discoveries in the 1800s, Archaeopteryx we've known about for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's a Jurassic-aged dinosaur, but it's one of these weird transitional fossils, meaning it's kind of halfway between a dinosaur and halfway between an avian dinosaur, a bird. So it possesses characteristics of both. And the key one being the feathers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Archaeopteryx was a big enigma for a long time because really it's the earliest feathered dinosaur that we have, preceding our understanding of avian and non-avian dinosaur lineage. So we had this incredible fossil. We didn't know where it fit in really until later in the 1900s, when originally not the most popular idea that birds are actually dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And even I've been around long enough that I remember going to a conference in Denver where it was still being argued between some of the younger paleontologists of the time and the old school guys as to whether or not birds were dinosaurs and the prevalence of feathers amongst dinosaurs.
So was there with humans, like Lucy is supposed to be this missing link, right? And,
it's similar to that.
And so what was the missing link for birds and dinosaurs?
Well, Archaeopteryx.
Yeah.
If you're going to use
that.
It is, but we find birds that are older than that, which is weird. But
okay.
That lineage isn't as straightforward as hominin lineage.
Okay.
But anyway, after Jurassic Park, not that long after Jurassic Park, and the dinosaur heresies and all that, in 1996, we find our first true feathered theropod dinosaur, Sinosauropteryx, one of many that are discovered following that in China. And the specimen of Sinosauropteryx, it's this little three-toed carnivorous dinosaur, and it's got a mohawk of feather-like structures, almost like fur, along its back.
Yeah.
And the whole body is preserved. So when that was discovered, that kind of initiated the third renaissance in dinosaur depiction. After that, people started finding all sorts of feathered dinosaurs over in China. And we've found a couple here in North America. But the funny thing about that, and I'm still skeptical about all this, not necessarily feathered dinosaur, bird lineage stuff, but now 100% of the time when you see a T-Rex, which is my favorite dinosaur, I know that's cliche, it's got a damn mohawk, or it's got a mane, or it's got fuzz all over its body.
Yeah.
Just like with each one of these renaissances in the past, the popular media and the public grasp on to this new idea that dinosaurs are feathered. So there's a little bit of science behind T-Rex being feathered. Its ancestors that presumably came from Asia are feathered, but we don't have any actual physical fossils of T-Rex feathers. So that's where my skepticism comes into play. It's possible, but...
Do you think it's safe to assume that we're wrong again?
It's always possible, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, does it have to have feathers? I mean, what's the problem if it doesn't have feathers? I mean,
there's no problem. I think the really objective scientist would say it's either way is possible.
What evidence did they have to think that, okay, they are feathered?
So Sean will understand my frustration here because he's a biologist and understands phylogenetics and that sort of thing. But it all has to do with the sort of evolutionary path of let's say Tyrannosaurus Rex. They do it with other lineages of dinosaurs too, but basically in the early late part of the Cretaceous in China, we had this dinosaur called Eutyrannus, which is a pretty good sized tyrannosauroid, so it belongs to the same subfamily as T-Rex.
Yeah.
It's got a phylogenetic connection with T-Rex, and it had feathers all over its body. So the assumption there is that because that lineage originated with that group, moved to North America, and ultimately led to T-Rex, that it is possible that T-Rex was feathered. Now, there's a big jump in logic, at least in my opinion, between it's possible because of the phylogenetic path for T-Rex to have feathers, to T-Rex had a mohawk.
Yeah,
right.
to T-Rex has to have feathers. Yeah, that seems like a pretty obvious kind of, even to me, like as a scientist, you would say, yeah, it could have feathers or it could not have feathers. Yeah.
But despite that, we're talking about T-Rex, and we've got many other dinosaurs and a lot of other really interesting feathered dinosaurs out there. To me, the group that's really interesting are the raptors, the group that ultimately evolves into birds. Because birds, by this point in the Cretaceous, when we had all these feathered dinosaurs in Asia, have already been around for millions and millions of years and evolved into really diverse groups, many groups that are very similar to what's around today. But we still have these non-bird dinosaurs that are feathered. In some cases, they have just this kind of downy coating. And in other cases, they have pinnaceous feathers. Feathers with a rachis, with a stiff kind of central shaft, right, like a bird. Not capable of flight, but they're these cool little raptors, with a big Jurassic Park raptor claw.
Yeah. That
have these long feathers on their arms and have fuzz all over their bodies. So probably very bird-like in how they moved and how they looked. And like I said, we find good fossils, not just impressions of feathers in rock, but we have like amber. Speaking of Jurassic Park, we have amber that preserves the full structure of these
right.
fossils.
Yeah.
So we know that there were a lot of feathered dinosaurs. Just most of the ones we find are in Asia. Now, because I'm trained as a geologist, I'm kind of unique in the field of paleontology in that I don't take a biological standpoint or perspective on everything. I have to look at the environment too. So if you look at the paleo environment in Asia during the time, it was much cooler. than what was going on in North America, especially in the later part of the Cretaceous. You jump over here when T-Rex was around along the western interior seaway, it was like tropical, subtropical, even semi-arid when you get down here to West Texas. So why does a T-Rex need to have insulatory feathers if it's nice and warm?
Right.
You know, that's another big question. It's possible. We also have a lot of skin impressions from tyrannosaurs in North America.
Proving that...
Well, not necessarily. We see they had scales. That's obvious. But in all of these skin impressions, we're lacking any sort of indication of even downy type feathers, little fur-like structures.
Okay.
But those wouldn't necessarily preserve really well in the rocks that are preserving the impressions. So you're talking we're kind of in the middle of this renaissance where people are debating.
Yeah.
And if you're objective, as you should be as a scientist, it's like it could be either way, you know? So we'll see. Maybe someone will find a T-Rex that has feather impressions. Who knows?
Well, we already have terror birds out there. So how many, from the last raptor or whatever, how many years span between that and when we find these terror birds?
So almost immediately after the dinosaurs went extinct,
yeah,
the terror birds emerged.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we could do a whole episode on terror birds.
Yeah, they were around for a long time, too.
Yeah. So that's another really good one to put in the docket. Well, anything else you want to wrap up with, Sean?
So I was going to ask, and I'm thinking in my mind is going like, so what about like the cooler, the more well-known, like in the sense like, yeah, sure. I mean, T-Rex is also very well-known, but Stegosaurus?
Stegosaurus?
Yeah. I mean, that's the one that is like as well-known, if not more well-known, right?
Yeah, one of the earliest dinosaurs described in detail, yeah.
And that and the Brontosaurus, right?
Well, yeah.
That's another one. But they're not bipedal. They are they walk on four legs, right? Do you think, has their depiction changed over the years?
No, not really.
Okay.
No.
So that's a pretty good job they did on that one,
well,
right?
They found full skeletons of those pretty early on. The only thing that's changed in terms of the long-necked dinosaurs is kind of their ecology. When they were first discovered, it was thought that they lived in swamps and basically waded in the water, and their neck was used to stick out of the water like a snorkel, I guess. Yeah. And that's changed because we find them in many different types of paleo environments.
Okay.
But Stegosaurus, we've had a pretty good idea about how it looked.
Yeah.
But does the plates move or not?
They probably could. Yeah, they weren't attached to the vertebrae, so they could move a little bit. I don't know if they had any musculature that would let them move, but they were vascular. They had,
because you do see those fights, those CGI fights where the Stegosaurus has its tail prompt and ready, and then it's moving. It's it's plates on its back to kind of shine the light in the T-Rex's eyes and blind it, and then
probably
swipe it with the tail.
Yeah, that's probably a little dramatic, but
that's when I played with toys, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I do.
I was going to say, aren't those two pretty equal in size, if not Stegosaurus being a little bit bigger than T-Rex?
No.
T-Rex was bigger one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stegosaurus was big, but T-Rex was 30 feet long.
I think, but the Brontosaurus would have had more skelly, right? Like it has more scales and stuff, right?
That's something we're learning more about. Not necessarily the group that Brontosaurus belongs to, but the more recent group, the Titanosaurs, like Alamosaurus, like we have here in the Big Bend, probably had scutes, like armor plates. Not like an armored dinosaur, but just kind of big, sort of separated armor plates.
I was going to say not like armadillo.
No, not to that extreme.
Okay.
Well, there you have it. Now we have so many questions that need to be answered by our scientific community.
Yeah.
So start arguing and continue to argue, my friends.
But not like Bone Wars.
Yeah, no Bone Wars.
Hey, this is the Wild West out here, baby. All right, we'll see you next week, everybody. Science Nights in the morning. thanks for listening to this episode of Science Nights in the Morning. Be sure and follow us on Patreon for exclusive gear and uncut episodes. Check out the latest science articles on our Facebook page and subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast listening app. You can also listen every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time at BigBenRadio.com. And if you got a question, we'll join the discussion. Hit the hotline at 432-217-1983 and record your message. We couldn't do this without you, and thank you so much for listening each and every week. That's Science Nights in the Morning with a K, and we'll see you next time.